Hi, everybody. Welcome to another virtual program presented by Summer Associate Hub. My name is Albert from Summer Associate Hub, and I'm proud to have all of you here. This is a fantastic session in collaboration with Sunny Kim, attorney and personal branding expert, joining us to talk about how 1Ls can leverage LinkedIn in the recruiting process. We'll be covering not only how to make your profile look professional and job search ready, but also how you can use the platform for networking. It is very underrated, in my opinion. Not my opinion, it's a fact.
It's a fact.
It is underrated how important your LinkedIn presence is as a component of your professional brand. And I'm glad that we are having this conversation as part of our virtual program series. Very timely and very important. Of course, the timeline of law student recruiting has accelerated, and many students are eager to know right now how they can get a leg up in connecting with firms, meeting attorneys, finding information they need to make the right decisions about practice areas and firms and having the right conversations. So this is really timely. Before we jump in, a quick intro. What is Summer Associate Hub? Summer Associate Hub is a free content and resource hub for law students embarking on the 1L and 2L recruiting process. I'm a former law student and big law associate. We know from our own experience how hard it is as a 1L to understand what it's really like to work as a lawyer and engage with firms. Our platform, summerassociatehub.com, has blog posts, podcast episodes, short video tutorials and exercises, interviews with attorneys, and other content like this to help you learn about practice areas and prepare for the recruiting process. We also host live virtual programs. If you're watching one right now, where students can learn directly from and network with law firm, recruiting team members, and other topics like this. We have some really nice programs scheduled for the school year. We have our very popular recruiting director Q&A. That is this Monday, November 10th. It is an absolutely all-star lineup with some of the best people in this industry in law firm recruiting. I mean it when I say it. It is not to be missed. So if it's on your calendar, make sure you're there. We're also hosting our transactional practice showcase and litigation practice showcase in January, and we'll post a link in the chat to sign up. And if you missed our law firm summer program showcases that we hosted the last couple of weeks, it's all recorded in our video library, and it's definitely worth checking out as you think about which firms you want to apply to. All right, we're also hosting our in-person job fair and interview programs. We're hosting in-person office tours happening in January and February. More info to come on that. And if you have a technical degree and you're interested in a patent role at a top firm, register for our IP virtual interview program on January 30th, featuring top firms who are looking for candidates for their patent programs. We will add the link in the chat for that. All right, so the best way to stay updated is our newsletter, summerassociatehub.com/newsletter. If you signed up for this event, don't worry about it. We already added you, so yeah, you're welcome. All right, so jumping into our event, super quick, as Sunny presents about upping your LinkedIn game, you could please feel free to use the Q&A to ask any questions that you have, and we'll take questions throughout the webinar if we can, and at the end. So, all right, let's get started. I'll let Sunny introduce herself and take it away.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'll do a more full intro, but as Albert mentioned, I was also a Big Law associate. I practiced at Davis Polk and Gunderson, and I'm also not ashamed to admit that before landing my Big Law offers, I actually graduated from undergrad after the financial crisis, and I probably got rejected from like 100 different places. So I really, really looked into how to up your game to make sure you really land those interviews and make those strong first impressions. And by the time I got to law school, I actually had 10 offers lined up before OCI. So everything I share with you today is stuff that I've used, is stuff that I've already told other law school students to implement, and I think you'll find it helpful. So I'll jump right in. So you might be wondering, like, okay, why should I even care about this? So what we don't talk about enough is that there's no shortage of law students who have strong grades, great work experience, great resume. And that's why a lot of students actually get lost in the shuffle during recruiting, right? And the students who do stand out and make themselves more memorable, they're the ones who are getting the opportunities and bypassing interview at times. So the truth is, law is a people business, and your future employers, including alumni, they want to connect with students that they actually like and feel like they can trust. And so when you actually show up professionally on LinkedIn, you're giving them a very good reason to notice and remember you for the opportunities that they have. So what do those opportunities actually look like? So not only, when you're a student, but also when you actually start practicing, if you show up actively on LinkedIn and build a very polished presence, you're going to be noticed and remembered in a really good way by recruiting professionals and hiring partners. And instead of getting kind of lost in that resume screening process, you're going to get like to the front of the line where you're getting interviews because someone in the organization connected with you or they saw you and then they make that referral. And that's like one of the fastest ways to actually get in front of people that you want to impress. So that's going to happen for you. And then, this also happens where professionals, when you actually go into the interview process, they may already know you because their colleague was like, hey, this person reached out to me on LinkedIn. I think we should interview them and check them out. This happened to me when I was a Big Law associate. We got like past, LinkedIn profiles of students who reached out to us. And I know this continues to happen even when you're experienced attorneys. So all of this is really important. But I think the foundational thing is like, as lawyers, as law students, we're kind of judged on our credentials, our grades, our affiliations with certain organizations. But when you actually show up on platforms like LinkedIn and you kind of present yourself as yourself and you make that strong impression in front of other people, then you're not having to rely just on those credentials alone to prove your value and land those opportunities. And with that comes a lot of confidence. So I think that is like the primary shift that I've seen, not only with law students, but also with lawyers. So why LinkedIn? So, there's a lot of social media platforms out there, but I would say this is the one that matters for you professionally. And I can tell you right now, when you are going into interviews, chances are the attorney who's interviewing you is just going to quickly do a Google search and then find your LinkedIn page, which means that, they're not looking at Instagram or your TikTok. Those are really hard to find. Whereas your LinkedIn, if you type in your name, it's really easy to find you. And another thing is, if you're at this webinar, then you probably already have a LinkedIn account and you know what that is. So you're not starting from zero and, forming an account and developing those connections. You probably already have a lot of connections to start with. So that gives you a good place to actually get started. And 94% of professionals are on LinkedIn. There's over 1 billion users worldwide, 200 million in the USA alone. And so you're not going to just use this just for this recruiting process, right? You're going to actually have to maintain this and want to maintain it to continue to get the roles and the opportunities that you want. So that is why I think it really makes sense for you to invest in this now. And another thing is, there's not that many students who are actually showing up in a polished way on the platform. So when you actually implement the tips that I shared today, you're really going to stand out. And I'm going to tell you the bar is really, really low, whereas the opportunity to stand out is huge.
Yeah, I like how you articulated that the bar is low. I think this is a good example as a business owner. I talk about this often, and as a law student, as a lawyer, this is a very low lift, high impact opportunity where you could do very very basic things that are low hanging fruit that would have a very high impact on your professional presence. As Sunny mentioned, so it's not like everyone's doing it. You could implement very easy steps to make a big difference, and it's not just in recruiting, even just in life when if somebody mentions somebody to me, oh, I don't know if I know that person. Let me look. Like, the first thing we do is look them up on LinkedIn. And if the person has, the proper headshot or the proper profile, which we'll talk about, then you have a better sense of who they are and if they're the right person or something like that. So it really is important, not only for recruiting, but just in your, professional life long term.
Exactly, exactly. And so my goal for you today, I don't want to have any fluffy conceptual things. Like everything I covered today are going to be really simple, practical things that you could apply just right after the session. So first, we're going to start with profile optimization. This is sort of the foundation of LinkedIn. You really want to make sure your profile looks polished. So we're going to walk you through exactly how to do that. And then second of all is thoughtful networking. So after you have that great profile, how do you actually reach out to the attorneys that you want to make that connection with and develop relationships and conversations in a really natural way? So it becomes like a no-brainer for them to actually want to talk to you. So we'll go through those 2 steps. All right, so now this is where I'll like drop my quick intro. Why am I even qualified to teach you this? That's totally a fair question. So I'm not a marketer by background, as I mentioned earlier, and Albert mentioned. I graduated from Columbia Law. I worked at Davis Polk, Gunderson. I was most recently in-house last year at a private equity fund in California called Pathway Capital. And I just kind of took a break. I feel like I worked a lot in the last decade, and I said, you know what, I'm gonna just do something I want for fun just to give myself that little bit of a break. So I started writing on LinkedIn and I just started getting a lot of traction. I was writing about, events I was attending in the legal community, just, my thoughts about practicing the law, tips and things like that. And I don't have a large network at the time. I think I had 1,000 connections and I was getting over 1 million impressions. And with that, a lot of opportunities actually came organically. And lawyers, law students, they were reaching out to me, asking me about LinkedIn, how to really leverage it to get the opportunities that they want. And I just helped them for free, and they were landing new roles, they were getting clients, and they were like, hey, we should probably pay you because seems to be valuable. And that's how I actually developed my business. So what I actually shared today, these are the tips that I've actually offered to all of my clients and law school students in the past as well. And if you actually choose to implement them, I feel very confident you're going to land the opportunities that you're looking for. All right, so let's jump into the profile. LinkedIn is a new digital resume, and as we said, everyone's going to check it before they meet you. So how do you actually make those improvements to make a strong first impression? So you might have seen these headlines before, law student, 1L law school name, and these are okay, but I think it could be much more enhanced. You want to tell your recruiters or hiring decision makers, like, hey, this is why I stand out from other candidates, because there's going to be hundreds of other law school students that they see their profiles for, and the ones who make those tiny tweaks really do stand out. And I would also like to mention that your headline, it does follow you everywhere. Every time you send a message to someone, your search results, and it's often the first impression that you make on the platform. So how do you actually improve it? All right. The formula is pretty straightforward, and I have some examples that you can take based on what your experience is like. So you could put, JD candidate at whatever law school you're at. And then if you're in a student org, or maybe you're in a law journal down the line, add those in. And then if like for example, if it's a technical area, you have some sort of patent background, and that's like the industry that you want to go into as a practice area, then you can mention that. You can mention your former role if you have some work experience. As you get more internships down the line, I would advise you to include those as well. But for now, you can, include, for example, JD Canada at Columbia Law. If you know you're interested in IP law or technology law, like put that in there, because people get excited when they see like this student actually is interested in the practice area that I practice in. They're gonna more likely want to talk to you. And then another thing is, like, if you're in moot court, you can mention that, as well as any other student org, especially if it's aligned with the practice area that you're interested in, maybe business law if you're into transactional practice. And then of course, if you have prior work experience, people like seeing that as well. It just gives them one more reason, like, oh, this person actually has some client-facing experience or previous roles where it's actually applicable to what we do. So you don't have to start from scratch. Put your resume into ChatGPT or whatever Gen AI tool you use and say, hey, I have this template. Pop out 20 examples for me that I can use as a LinkedIn headline. And it should give you maybe like 80% there of what you need. And then all you have to do is kind of tweak it a little bit. So that's one advice that I have. Another thing is your profile photo. So whether we like it or not, we live in a world where impressions do matter. And one of the first impressions that you make is with your profile photo, right? And so a lot of people actually don't have a profile photo, which is really kind of off-putting, especially because there's so many fake accounts out there now, where when I receive DMs and they don't have a profile photo, I usually don't respond because I don't know if the account's real. So as a baseline, you definitely want to have a profile photo. And then another thing is, pixelated photos. So if you see the second photo, it's a little bit blurry, and it kind of is like, ugh, this person didn't really take this seriously. It was kind of an afterthought. It's so easily fixable, so that's one more thing I would watch out for. And of course, there's those cropped photos from a party we went to, or a wedding we went to. It kind of looks, again, like it's an afterthought, and it kind of makes it look distracting. So those are some of the things that I would fix in your profile photo. Another thing is Zoom really matters. So on LinkedIn, your LinkedIn profile photo, it kind of is really, really small, right? So if you're kind of zoomed out at like in the second photo, people can't really register your face as well. And your facial expression and just having a profile photo is the first step to establishing trust. So the closer you zoom in and kind of show who you are and like make yourself recognizable, it's going to help out a lot. So that's one more thing to keep in mind. And trust for your audience, the first two photos look really polished. So if you want to go into maybe government work or firms that serve more institutional clients, then, it does make sense to have a very professional attire. Whereas if you want to go into maybe a firm that does emerging markets work or a startup, then it may make more sense for you to have a more business casual outfit. And look at the organizations that you are applying for and check out the LinkedIn profiles of the people who work there, because how they're reflecting themselves on LinkedIn is most likely how, they're going to resonate with the people who are kind of dressed like them or smiling or not smiling or whatever, right? So go through to kind of inform what your impression that you want to make is. And then lastly, like facial expression does matter. I personally like people who are smiling in photos, but if you want to go for a more serious look because you're going to, I don't know, like a firm that is very serious and they do like high stakes litigation or something and everyone seems to look really serious, then yeah, maybe that works. But again, it's just like being very intentional with the people that you want to resonate with.
And actually, one thing I want to add there about the profile photo, I love the examples that you gave because I think so many people just take whatever picture they have from their Instagram or something. Like this is not Instagram. So like having like your arm around like your frat bro or your sorority sister in college, like this is not the profile for that. So I love those examples. Nowadays, so not like I'm lucky, and you probably have the same thing. I have a headshot from when I was at my firm. I just took the headshot that they used for my website bio at the firm. So for a law student, you might not have an opportunity, to get a professional headshot like that. But honestly, now we're lucky. iPhone cameras and Android cameras are so good nowadays. You could just take a few minutes to put on the proper attire, and even you and your roommate or you and your friend could take turns taking a really good headshot, editing it on the computer, and then putting it on your LinkedIn instead of using whatever photo you have from the beach or vacation.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's very simple and it shouldn't take you that long, but it really does go a long way. So that's one thing that I would keep in mind. And another thing is background banner. And I would say like 99% of law school students don't have it and they just use the default banner on LinkedIn. But, this is another opportunity for you to establish a connection with the person who's actually checking out your profile, right? And one thing is like you might not have an idea of what to actually put in there. So let me give you some ideas. You could put your campus photo. So like for example, Columbia Law School, like they have a very specific building that's on the campus where an alumni would immediately say, "Oh, this person went to that school." That's like one more reference point. Or your city skyline, like in LA or New York, like it kind of shows that I'm from this area. It could be a photo of you maybe on a panel or a moot court where you're presenting. So it's just a couple more sort of steps for you to take. That shouldn't take very long, but it'll set you apart from all the other students who don't have anything like this. Also, I have some pre-made banners that I'll share a link to with Albert after the session, and then you can check those out as examples of what you can put in there, and then at least have something on there so your profile looks more polished. Okay. The next thing is your About Me section. So in your LinkedIn, the first thing that people see when they scroll through your profile after your headline is this section. So it's about 65 words. I really want to emphasize that the first 4 lines is the most important because after that, it kind of cuts off and won't show anymore. And so you want to give anyone who's visiting a very clear idea of, where you go to school, what's your interest. So this is a very clean template that I think you can repurpose based on what your involvement in student orgs or your prior work experience is like. I'm a JD candidate at law school with a background in, and then you could put your previous work experience, or if you don't have any, you can just put your undergrad and what you majored in. Um, and then if you do have some work experience, put that in and then just to give a pretty high level description of like what you did and what skills you developed, especially the ones that translate really well into your next role that you're trying to apply for. And then put in your current involvement in student orgs or clinics or journals. And then say, if you do have something in mind that you're interested in practicing, indicate that in your profile as well. So there's an example that I put below. I'm a 1L at UCLA with a background in finance and data analysis. Before law school, I was a business analyst at Deloitte. I currently am involved in the Business Law Association and I'm interested in corporate and emerging market work in a law firm setting. So that's just like a really simple headline, but it's crisp. And then anyone who visits your profile is going to be able to understand, exactly what your experience is like, and where you want to be headed. So again, you can use ChatGPT for this. You don't have to start from scratch. So just pop in this template, put in your interest, ask it to prompt you questions to get this set up, and then you should have one going in like 10 minutes or less. And then your experience section. So this is one of the places that recruiters and alumni will check out. It basically is the place where you list prior experience in your professional setting. So it'll show like the organization that you worked at, as well as a description of what you did there. So, even as law students, you may already have internship experience or clinic experience, moot court experience, and you can actually write those out in your work experience section. So it's important to kind of showcase outcomes, not tasks. So what I mean by that is instead of just saying, research legal issues, it's just so vague. I think people like seeing more substance and something concrete. So it could be like research and summarize reporting requirements for a client memo. It shows that you did something that actually landed on a client memo or something a little bit more impactful. And then another thing is keep it 2 to 3 lines max. The longer it is, it's going to cut off. It's just going to show those first 2 or 3 lines, and then people have to click see more, which they most likely won't do. So make those 2 lines impactful. And just as you get more experience, as you get more internship roles, update this section because people do go through it and they're kind of going to also compare it to what's on your resume. So if it's not showing the same thing on LinkedIn, they might be kind of caught off guard. So it's just one thing to keep in mind to keep this whole system and updated as you advance through your career.
Sunny, one of our audience members asked if we could paste the language for the headline into the chat so they can copy and paste it. Is that okay?
Oh yeah, and also Albert, I have all this templates and I can send you a link with all of this included. So you don't have to scramble to paste this.
Okay,
I'll have it ready for everyone after the session as well.
awesome. Thank you so
Great,
much.
no problem. Um, And oh, open to work badge. So this is kind of a controversial badge. You might have seen it already. Maybe you have it on yourself. I do not recommend actually turning on this feature publicly. And the reason for that is that people don't really pay attention to your expertise. They kind of just see the status and you're perceived as in need of a job. And for law students, 1Ls especially, like we all know that you're looking for a job, so you don't have to put this on. It doesn't really add that much value. What I would actually focus your attention on is to optimize your headline and your about me section. That's going to be a better bang for your buck than actually putting this on.
I'm actually gonna chime in here and go even further.
Yeah.
I would say absolutely, if you are a 1L looking for a job at a law firm, I would say absolutely do not put that badge on. I just wanted to make sure that to take it a step further. The open to work badge, I think, is common when, in industries where if folks are between jobs, and there's nothing wrong with it in certain cases. But as Sunny mentioned, you're a law student, everyone's looking for a job. You're in the traditional pipeline to find a job. There's no advantage to adding it. In fact, when a law firm sees that, they might assume you're like a 3L who graduated and maybe still on the market or something like that, and you're not like in their traditional pipeline. Even when you're out there in the market, and we also have a platform called Lateral Hub, which helps with a job board for attorneys who are laddering between firms. And we have a lot of experience with this. Even in the lateral market, you might say, oh well, if I'm open to work as a lateral, maybe I'll turn that on privately or publicly so recruiters can find me. And even when recruiters use LinkedIn to find candidates at other firms to reach out to them or to make a list or something, they're not filtering for open to work because
Mm,
most of the laterals they're looking for are still employed and they're just trying to figure out if they want to switch jobs, and very rarely are they actually publicly not working. So I would shy away from this badge unless you're really confident that you need it. But as a 1L looking for a job at a law firm, as Sunny mentioned, this is absolutely do not include this.
yeah, for sure. Even when you are, later looking for a job, there's a way to actually turn this on in the background, so it's only available to recruiters, but it's not publicly available. So that's like something that I would consider. But yeah, as we both mentioned, it's not it's not signaling the right message that you want to send. So I would definitely not put this on. All right. So now that you have a polished profile, the next step is for you to actually grow your relationships with your network. And you want to do it in a really thoughtful way. There are so many people who just type in canned messages and expect to get something. You don't want to be one of those law school students. I've been on the receiving end of that. And so I want to tell you the exact steps on how to do this. So first, you're going to find the relevant connections. There's different methods to do this. And then the next step is to actually send personalized connection requests. And then third step is to actually build the relationships that you have connected with through comments and DMs. So first step, all right. So if you are looking for, attorneys that you want to connect with, use the LinkedIn search bar. It's super simple. But you don't want to connect with everyone, especially if you want to work for a certain firm or you want to work in government or whatever it is. You want to be strategic about the people that you're making connections with. So for example, let's say you are interested in working at Latham and Watkins, and that is one of your target firms. Then type in associate at Latham and Watkins or partner at Latham and Watkins and kind of see which lawyers pull up. LinkedIn is pretty good with the search algorithm, so it's likely going to pop up connections who are like 1 degree or 2 degrees removed. And then you can also, connect with recruiters from those firms and organizations as well. So you could put like legal recruiter at Latham & Watkins, and then it should pull them right up and see, who are the faces of the people that you want to be looking for when you go to those networking events as well. Also, so after you do that, you're gonna filter for people, and then there are more search terms or search filters that you can play around with. Obviously, if you have a second degree connection, that's great. Maybe you have a mutual connection who already knows you and can make an introductions. Actively hiring. So if you're maybe looking for a more boutique role and they don't advertise for positions as much as like big law firms do who are always hiring, you can be on the lookout for when they're actually actively hiring. That badge is available, or that indication is available if you actually do premium. There's a premium LinkedIn option. I think it's like $39 a month. You can do a free trial on that when you're in this recruiting period. Another thing is location. So if you know for a fact that you want to practice in DC or California or whichever locale you're interested in, you might want to filter for that location. So you're actually making connections with the people who work in the area that you want to end up. And then school. So this one's really huge. So you can actually filter by your school alumni or even undergrad alumni. If you're reaching out to people who work or who work now at firms, but they have also gone to the same school as you, they're more likely to want to accept your connection request as well. So that's another tip that I would have. And if you really want to dive into connecting with alumni who are more, I think a lot of them are more than welcome to actually want to connect with law school students. There's an easy way to do this that's not already covered in the first step, and that is to actually go to your law school website or LinkedIn page, and then they should have a tab for alumni. So like Columbia Law School, where I went to law school, they have it. And so this is like a really easy way for you to actually filter for all of those 25,000 alumni who went to Columbia Law School who might have that second or third degree connection in common.
I've I said that today I learned that.
Oh, cool.
I've never known that. This is a great tip.
Yeah, and it's also great because there's also like a breakdown within that of, people who work at firms, people who work in certain organizations, like, certain government agencies. So you can even do a further filter within the alumni section. So you don't have to reach out to all 25,000 people, for example.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, and then so yeah, as I said, you want to use this alumni network filter as well. So one of the things that you want to consider is that try to look for alumni who kind of graduated in 2000 onwards. They're more likely to be active on LinkedIn. I'm not trying to, paint with a broad brushstroke, but if they went to law school like way before that, then they may not even be on the platform. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And then you can filter, as I mentioned, for the organizations that you're really interested in working for, firm names, agency names, etc. And then you can also filter by sector. So if they work in government, entrepreneurship, etc. And then finally, where they live. So just a couple more sort of tools for you to really narrow down the scope of your search. And then also, check out the people who actually viewed your profile. If you go to your LinkedIn page, there's this section called, profile views. So you'll be able to see, okay, I mean, this is extreme because I have more connections now. You might not have this much, but there are going to be people who are checking out your profile. So if they already took an interest in you, that means that they're like a warm hiring decision maker. So they already kind of thought you were interesting enough to go to your profile and check you out. So if they went there, then if you're not already connected, send them a connection request. Um, and another thing is you're probably going to go to a lot of networking events and career fairs in the coming months. And so whenever you go to these events, you're going to meet a lot of attorneys and recruiters. And so make a habit of actually sending them a connection request after that conversation or after meeting them. This also applies to anyone that you meet or listen to at a panel who comes to your law school to speak or conference. Those are all great connections. You might not need them now, but they may be great connections down the line. So one thing that I think they will be very impressed by if you actually choose to use this tip is, people kind of scramble to say, oh yeah, like let's connect on LinkedIn. Or you can say, oh, I love to connect on LinkedIn. And then they have to like spell out their name and it's like this whole awkward dance. You can totally avoid that by having the LinkedIn app on your phone. There's this tiny little QR code that it generates. And then you'll be able to just like whip out your phone and just show them, and then they have to just scan it and add you as a connection. It's so much more simple, and it avoids that whole dance of like, oh, I couldn't find you, and then you never make that connection request. So that's one more tiny little tip to keep in mind.
I have to say, I've been on the other side of it. I love when we do these virtual programs and I get connection requests from students. I think it's a very smart thing to do. I think it's great to connect with people, especially if you've either heard them speak or interact with them personally. It's such an easy thing to do with such a, but but it makes a great but it's obviously it has a great impact. Someone actually had a question that was exactly around that, so we'd love to cover that now if we can do that. So after if you have a virtual coffee chat with someone or a net where you talk to the networking event, of course you want to send them a connection request. What type of message would you recommend sending to them on LinkedIn, either with a connection request or afterwards?
Such a fantastic question, and you like read my mind because that is literally what I'm going to cover next.
Oh, perfect. Okay, amazing, amazing.
So,
One thing I want to add about just before we move on to this point about the research, there's another use case about the research that I have heard law students doing, which I'm always impressed by. Now we're talking about networking in order to help bolster your job search and to figure out which firms that you want to apply to. Now, hopefully you'll get to the point where you're deciding between firms and you want to figure out, okay, which firm do I want to go to? And I've spoken to some people, but they all sound the same. And I've had friends who, over the last few years who were in law school, they actually used the tools that Sunny just described, and they found people who used to work there, maybe who went to their law school, and they used the former company filters, and they spoke to a few people who used to work at this firm and a few people who used to work at their firm, and they were super honest about their experience there because they weren't at the firm anymore, and it was a great way to suss out which firm might be a better fit. So it's another use case to think about as you go through the process. That's not just in the beginning, but also at the end.
for sure, for sure. I've actually used that myself, and the people who don't work there anymore are much more likely to be very honest about their experience, so that's totally on point. All right, so when you do send that connection request to get to that question, sometimes it's totally fine to send one without a note, especially if you already both know each other, so it's like a no question that they're going to accept it. But if that's not the case and you maybe had a very brief introduction or you haven't even met them in person, you just saw them speak at a conference or a panel or something, then I think it does make sense to add a note to those personalized or to personalize that connection request. It kind of shows effort that you're not just randomly adding people. And I think it makes it much more likely that they're going to accept it and want to connect back. So, what can you actually say, right? These are some examples that I have, and I'll share this after the session as well, so you have them on hand. But you can say, I'm a 1L at Carey Law. I saw you're an alum of the school and I'd love to connect. This is if you're in the alumni setting and you found some alumni that you want to connect with. Um, or it could just be, hey, hi, I'm so and so. I'm a JD candidate here and I'm interested in this practice area. I admire your path at this agency. Presumably it's in that practice area. I'd be grateful to connect. Third example, this is when you actually saw them speak on a panel, or maybe you met them at a brief event. You could say, I really enjoyed your remarks at this event. I'm a JD candidate here. I would appreciate the chance to connect. Just like really simple. You can just repurpose this for whatever event you went to. But it just shows that you put in a little bit of thought. And you're mentioning something that's specific to them or about their practice area. So that's just going to make someone want to say yes to your connection request, right? And then let's say, chances are they accept it. Great. What do you say after that to actually continue the conversation? Because your goal right now is to actually get on their radar and hopefully get them to get interested in you enough to, maybe get you an interview or get you past the interview or the application stage, right? So don't stop when they accept it. Actually follow up on that conversation. So the key here is to be a little bit more specific than what you actually indicated in your connection request in the beginning. So you could say something like, hey, thanks for connecting. I'm very interested in this practice area. I saw your experience at this organization. I'm curious to see, what drew you to that work and what you think students should be focusing on while in law school. Um, I love messages like this. I've received these like on and off. And I've always been impressed when law school students actually take the time to reach out and kind of be very genuine, right? They're not saying, give me a job at your firm. They're saying, I want to prepare myself to hopefully land a role down the line. I want to know how to best prepare myself. It's like very no pressure, and people like love receiving this, myself included. Another one is like, if you heard them speak at a conference or panel, or maybe they gave a toast at a recruiting event, and they mentioned something very specific. Write that down maybe in your phone when they're speaking afterwards, and then say, your point about this specific takeaway, this specific comment, it really stuck with me for XYZ reason. I'm a JD candidate at this law school. I'm interested in this practice area. I'd love to hear what you recommend for students in this field. So you're not really asking for a job, you're asking for insight. And I think that's what really makes a difference. And this is really like a foundational step. If you do it really thoughtfully, you're going to stand out. You're not going to be just one of those other law school students who are just reaching out without any substance. And they're going to actually remember you. I've actually interviewed candidates who are kind of outside of our law schools that we typically like look at. And because they sent me this message, they got ahead of the line and they got an interview. So it does work. Albert, did you have something to add here?
Um, yeah, so this is very similar to the advice that we would give for like a follow-up email. And I think so I
Mhm.
wanted to just mention a couple of things. One is I think, yeah, I think you're exactly right. It's important to be thoughtful. It's important to just be upfront and transparent. If you've already, and just as an extra note, because the timeline for the law firm recruiting has really accelerated, and I think no one really expected this to happen as much. But there are plenty of law firms that have already even opened their portals for students to apply, even right now, before the semester's over. So a lot of students have been very focused on like making connections with attorneys so that they can get some insight about the firm that they could use in a cover letter, use an application to differentiate themselves because they don't have their grades or another way to differentiate themselves. So one insight that we've been getting from the process over the last couple of weeks is that there's a lot more activity of like this type of outreach to attorneys to connect and all that. So I think there's a lot of people in the seat that Sunny and I used to sit in of getting that kind of inbound requests from students, how can you differentiate your request, right? If they're hearing from all these different students who want to connect, who want to just to get that conversation, how can you show that you're being genuine? And I think by doing that is by pointing to a specific thing that they said on a panel or pointing to a part of the conversation that you had with them to remind them of the conversation. So this was always important, but it's take on additional importance over the last few weeks. So it really is an important point. The other thing is, and I give this advice also about follow-up emails. When you send a thoughtful DM, whether it's part of the connection request or part of the conversation you have with them, you're also establishing a paper trail. And as Sunny mentioned, this is not just a connection for now, but it's also a connection in the future. If you end up wanting to reach out to that person in 3 months from now, as the job search process, progresses, they might not remember you. They might have been 100 students. But if you have that DM in the conversation, you respond. On top of that, it's a hi. I just wanted to let you know that I ended up applying, and I'm looking forward to hopefully speaking with you soon. They open that message, they could see that you guys already chatted before. Oh yeah, I remember Albert. He's the guy from that thing, right? Without that, it's hard for them to remember that. So it is a good way to establish your paper trail, so to speak. The one other thing I'm gonna mention is if you're also sending a follow-up email, you want to be thoughtful not to do too much. So if
Mm,
you are sending a connection request, you want to add a note, and Sunny, feel free to disagree or agree. Hey, sent you an email, not hey, but thanks for connecting. I sent you an email, but I also wanted to connect here, just so they don't feel like you're trying to attack them at all angles and you're being thoughtful about it.
for sure, for sure. That's a really good point. Yeah, I wouldn't copy and paste the same thing in LinkedIn and then send the same email on as well. Like that would seem repetitive. So yeah, definitely be mindful of that. And then, this may happen where you kind of exchange conversations back and forth. And this is not just a tip for this recruiting process, but down the line, if you're looking for positions, um, people are like, you can sense the vibe if they're actually connecting with you and they're interested. If they responded, that's a really good sign. So the next step, it may make sense to be like, oh, would you be open to jumping on a 15-minute call to talk more? This would be really great, I think, because it gives them a chance to actually talk to you even before you get into an interview. And chances are, if they like you, they're gonna pass on your name. So, if it does make sense in a context where they're responding back, you've exchanged a couple DMs here and there, then propose it. And if they say no, that's totally fine. You're not gonna be demanding their time. You're just sending them an invite and making it very easy for them to say yes or no. So, um, that's one more thing. So just overall, like one great tip that Albert mentioned is like don't duplicate things, don't like attack them or make them feel attacked from different angles. But another thing is like avoid kind of sending canned emails or messages where you're copying and pasting it and sending it to multiple lawyers. We all like lawyers all talk to each other. So if you're sending like a lot of the same messages, they're gonna talk about you and that's not gonna be good. So make sure again, it's personalized, it's catered to specifically them. And then again, quality over quantity. So instead of sending like 100 messages, it's better for you to send five that are really thoughtful and it clearly shows that you like put time into it and you talk to them beforehand or whatever it is. So and the thing is, double check the information before you press send. Very early on when I was in the recruiting process, I sent the wrong name and like I didn't get that job. So people care about these things. Make sure you check those details. And then partners do have a lot of sway, but mid-levels and senior associates, they may help you get in the door. So don't ignore them. They may be really, really valuable resources to help you and also give you really practical advice about what it's like to practice in their firm or their practice area as an associate. And then if you don't get replies, that's totally normal. Do not take it personally. Like when you're in a law firm and you're working till 10 p.m. or 11 p.m., it may just have gotten lost and they forgot about it. So like, no hard feelings and maintain professionalism. As Albert said, you are leaving a paper trail. And so they can go back to that message. And if you didn't leave a good remark or it was unprofessional, they're going to know that. So that's something that, that's something that I would also keep in mind. And yeah, that's it. I would love to connect with you on LinkedIn. So if you want to get some additional advice, I share them pretty often in my LinkedIn. So please send me a connection request. I would love to connect with you. And also, before we jump in the Q&A session, if you have time for a quick survey, I would love for you to fill this out. If you do, I'll enter you in for a chance to have a one-on-one consultation with me about your LinkedIn. So I'd love to offer that. And for any law school admins out there, I actually do offer a fuller version of this workshop to students, and I think a lot of them do find it very valuable. And it's very much tailored to your school and your alumni, etc. So if you'd like to bring me in, I'm happy to connect as well. But I hope this was helpful, and I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you so much, Sunny. That was fantastic. But we have a few very good questions in the Q&A. I'd love to tee them up for you. Before I do that, I wanted to mention a couple quick things that I just based on the last couple slides. Number one is I think and we have content about this in Summer Associate Hub about like the right way to network when reaching out to attorneys. And I think a lot of students feel like, especially with the timeline of the recruiting now, there's applications happening pretty much starting now.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of students feel like when they're networking, they have to put on this front that they're like networking genuinely just to hear about the attorney's experience, and then they're like afraid, and then they play this like song and dance, and then like, oh well, if you could put in a good word for me, I would appreciate it. You don't have to do that. I think if you're reaching out on LinkedIn or over email, you could be upfront and say, hi, whether it's an associate or partner, hi, I recently applied to the summer associate position at X firm. I thought I'd reach out to you because I would love to connect to hear more about your experience at the firm. And that's a totally genuine, like you don't have to hide the ball that you applied to be genuine. Those two things can both exist. I think it actually is more awkward when someone reaches out and tries to play this game and like as if the attorney doesn't know what you're trying to do. You're obviously trying to get a job, right? It's not a secret. So that's obviously totally fine. And we talked a little bit before about how like former associates are more honest. And that is true, but I've also noticed that associates are also professionally honest even when they're working at the firm. So I think use the opportunity to speak, not just partners, speak with associates at the firm, understand what their experience is like, and even if they've had a positive experience, it might not be the positive experience that you're thinking that you're interested in. Maybe they had a very positive experience working for private equity firms, and you want to work with startups, or vice versa, right? So just something to think about as you go through that process. But anyway, yeah. So let's tee up a few questions before we wrap up. So. Um, One question, great question here. Well, do you recommend putting your LinkedIn URL on your resume?
Oh, that's a really great
Good
question.
question.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad idea at all. It kind of also a lot of people's URL is like a random string of letters. And there is a way to customize your LinkedIn profile link. So it says linkedin.com/sunnykim or linkedin.com/Albert Powell. So that's one more step that I would recommend you take. So you're not putting in random strings of letters that people have to put in. And it's also going to make it more easy for people to find you through Google when they just search your name if you have that LinkedIn custom link that actually has your name. So that's something that I would recommend.
It's a great tip. So I'm glad we had that question teed up because changing the URL is a great tip. We actually have a blog post about that on Summer Associate Hub from one of our collaborators, Amanda Haverstick. It's a fantastic tip. I just actually just included my URL in the chat as an example, and also of course feel free to connect with me. But it does also help from an SEO perspective for people to find you. So that's a great point. All right. So another question. For the about section, what advice do you have for students with more beginner experience in various fields rather than like a lot of experience, meaning they have a little bit of experience in a few different things versus a lot of experience, maybe a long tenure at a certain place before law school.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's important to be strategic about which experience you think translates best for the type of practice area or role you're trying to land. So, be mindful of that. If you have some client-facing experience and you're trying to go to a firm, then yeah, it makes sense to highlight those experiences more, especially because it is that limited space. So pick out those experiences that you would highlight most in an interview, because that is what you would be trying to sort of get their attention on when they visit your LinkedIn profile as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. And then this is more of a technical question about just how LinkedIn works. So I think one of the audience members asked, does LinkedIn limit the amount of notes that like you can send each month, and is it worth it to pay for LinkedIn Premium? My personal thought is you're probably not sending enough to meet the maximum for the free version. But what do you think, Sunny?
Yeah, there is a limitation, and they do set it. It's not across the board. You have the same limit. I believe it differs based on your activity.
Mhm.
So you may like have less or more than others, but during the time where you do really want to send maybe more than like 10 or whatever, however much you're allocated, if you seem to find yourself meeting that limit very often, then just do the free trial. Because I think during they give you a month where you can have that access for free. And so during the critical period where it is that active recruiting process timeline, then yeah, in that case, I do think it makes sense to do it.
Great. And then one other thing about premium is I'm pretty sure, and correct me if you're the expert, Sonny, with premium, you can people cannot see that you viewed their profile, but you can see that they viewed your profile. I think if you toggle the right settings. Uh,
Yeah, you can do that. There is a setting where if you make yourself visible to other people that you visited their profile, then they should be able to see you too. And LinkedIn will show you all that information, so that's available in premium. And one more thing I do want to mention is even if so like the note that you add to the connection request, that is limited, but DMs are not limited after they've accepted your connection request. So it's still possible to build that connection after they've accepted it without any sort of limitation that LinkedIn places. So that's one way you can kind of bypass the whole connection limit, connection adding note.
and when you add a note to a connection request and the person accepts your connection request, it actually turns into a DM.
Yep.
So you don't actually have to go in and send the message again. That'll be in your DM history with them. So don't think like, oh, that message, the paper trail's gone. No, it's preserved there. So not to worry. Yeah. And one other thing that's important to mention, we talked a lot about, and it kind of just I just thought of this before we wrap up. We talked a lot about optimizing your profile. We talked about how to use it to network. Content creation is a whole different thing. I don't think we're expecting anyone to come on here and become like a 1L influencer. But there are easy ways where you can at least just do commenting on things and stuff like that, engaging where it makes sense. And one of the best ways to do that is if you attend a law firm recruiting event at your school or that was hosted in your city, and you've met people there and you had a good time and the recruiting manager from the firm posts that on their profile, like we had such a great time at this event at NYU and we loved hearing from all these students. It's definitely not like out of bounds to comment and say thank you so much for having us. I really enjoyed meeting the attorneys, and like commenting on that publicly might seem a little bit scary, but it's a great way to show the firm that you care, that you're taking initiative, that you're confident. And and the recruiting managers spend all the time on LinkedIn. They're on LinkedIn all the time, and if they're able to see somebody commenting, they'll comment back. Thanks for coming, and it's a great way to make a connection with them. Aside from just kind of the back channeling, DMing, and connecting.
For sure, that's a really great tip. Yeah, I would say, and if you notice something that they did, like that was a little bit, very thoughtful or memorable, and you could tell that they went the extra mile to really make the students feel welcome, and you notice that, like mention that, like if you don't feel comfortable commenting, there's no harm in just saying, hey, like,
Yeah.
when I saw you at the event, I saw that you did this and that. If I feel like it really made a difference and made me feel more welcome. So I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. Like someone
Yeah.
would like I would love to receive a message like that. That's so like thoughtful and it's like a small detail, right? As long as it's genuine and you're not, I think it's we can tell when you're trying to suck up versus like,
Yeah.
if it's like not disingenuous. So yeah, as long as it's genuine, I think it does come across in a very positive light.
And sometimes less is more.
Yeah.
So yeah. So then last question here. I guess it's a follow-up question to what we just talked about. Does interacting with a firm on LinkedIn publicly hurt your hurt your chances with another firm? And I would say not the case. I think firms know that you're going through the process, and I think showing that you're engaging on LinkedIn is a good thing, probably across the board. Um, if you posted on LinkedIn saying like my dream is to work at XYZ firm and only that firm, that's a different story. But just commenting on various things with more just generic thank yous and stuff like that, I don't think would have much of an impact.
I totally agree.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Sunny. This was fantastic. Really, really helpful insights for when I was going through the process. As we talked about before, a lot of this is very low lift, but has a very high impact in terms of presenting yourself professionally on this platform. So I really appreciate the time, Sunny. And again, reminder for anyone who's watching, we have our recruiting director Q&A this Monday. It is not to be missed, and it's going to be really great. We have a bunch of other virtual and in-person programs coming up this season, so make sure to pay attention to our newsletter. We have some really important updates coming up over the next couple of weeks on registration for new programs. So thanks again for Sunny Kim for joining us, and hope everybody has a good night.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. Talk to you later.